I want to talk about entrepreneurs today. Entrepreneurs, I sent out an email last week. If you're on my email list, you probably got it, whether you read it or not, who knows. But I said some things in that email that I think were a little, I think entrepreneurs would probably take offense to. And entrepreneurship nowadays, and entrepreneurs are, it's like there's a cult of entrepreneurship. Like, we're these people that you should worship that have this magic touch to them. And so, I covered a couple things in that email that, kind of got a little ugly. So I'm actually gonna share the email with you in just in a little while, in just a few minutes. But before I do that, I do want to just give you a little bit of an idea of what I did this weekend. I just got back from out of town, from the Great White North, Vermont, which is basically Canada. I didn't really realize that until I went. Not that I haven't been there before, and I knew it was close to Canada, but I guess it's like north of Canada. Anyway, so I did some work with a coaching business up there that does about $3 million a year, and we did a lot of things. I'll cover a couple things, but today I want to share with you why coaching an entrepreneur gets messy, and a little bit about some eMyth business coaching that I did. And not that I'm an eMyth officially certified business coach, but for those that have actually checked out the book, checked out the basic idea of the eMyth, the idea that if you are this amazing chef, that you should start a restaurant. If you're an amazing painter, you should start a painting company. If you're an amazing coach, you should start a coaching business. That's the myth. The myth is that if you're such a great artist, so to speak, or you're such a great technician at the thing that the business makes, that you should run the business. And the fact is that's the opposite of correct. You're probably more the artiste, the technician, the expert. And experts, real experts, tend to be the worst entrepreneurs known to man. Anyway, so I beat up entrepreneurs last week a little bit, and this weekend I kind of enjoyed beating up my entrepreneur clients as well. I get to have a little bit of fun in that. But today, again, like I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about why that was messy, and a little bit about how the eMyth came into our conversation. So let's get right to that. All right, so this is something I'm going to share in a second, but I'll give you the premise here. First of all, entrepreneurs are a mess. Like, if you're a really great entrepreneur, you kind of organizing everything and putting everything in the right silo, it's probably not your greatest capacity. Now, some entrepreneurs are a little bit more organized than others. There's no doubt about that. But for the most part, it's not their number one skill. Organization is not their number one skill. So an entrepreneur usually ends up looking kind of like this guy here. He's kind of under a pile of mess that he's made by taking all these different risks and thinking about what the business is going to do and all this stuff, and is just looking for help. And as business coaches, as coaches in general, we can really help these guys. Because chances are we're not the entrepreneur. We have strengths that these business owners don't have. Not to mention that we also can reflect back to them what's going on, like what this actually looks like. Because a lot of times entrepreneurs usually have a pretty solid ego, right? They're pretty confident. Not like a bad thing, but they're just really about what they're doing. That's why they can take risks, where a lot of people who are not entrepreneurs, who wish they were entrepreneurs, aren't really willing to take the risk. I talk to a lot of experts, coaches for that matter, almost daily, not necessarily completely daily, but almost daily. Hey, Kimberly, you got me on Udemy, I see, so really, really cool. So glad you found me here too, because this is a little bit more live than Udemy is. Anyway, but I guess what I was saying was that entrepreneurs, they take risks, and which is huge, and people who are not entrepreneurs, experts, coaches, artists, people who really know their stuff, they're lousy at taking risks. They really suck at taking risks. So we got to appreciate and respect what entrepreneurs bring to the table. But again, organization is usually not one of the things that entrepreneurs bring to the table. So in this particular situation, the CEO of the organization was in the retreat that I was running for them. It was a 2-day strategic planning retreat. We were going through every step of the strategic planning process. We were really just bringing the executive team together. These are the four stakeholders of the organization, 2 owners, and then the rest of the executive team, which makes a total of 4. The owners are active executives as well. And we were just looking to figure out, what is this organization going to do over the next 12 months? What's the most important out of all of that? What are the priorities? And then organize it so that this is not what their plan ultimately looks like. We wanted to create a plan. Let me just show you ideally what that plan looks like. Plan that looks something like this. It's got a very specific list of items, and then each item is outlined out, and it's got exactly here are the goals, here are the steps in those goals, here are the actions that need to be taken, this kind of thing. This is just the last plan I put together in 2015. I need to go on a retreat and do another one of these, actually. It's time to update. Here's an older version of it. This one's even probably a little bit more well organized. But again, I'm not getting into the details of these right now. But that's what our outcome was during this time. And so a lot of things came out in this conversation. This is a business that's having some severe challenges right now, some growing pains. They increased their business by about 50% over the last year. And sometimes businesses get to the point where they outstrip their resources. And so they're kind of in that world right now. So one of the things that we found very early on, because we were talking about priorities, we were talking about what the business needed to do. I gave all the executives a chance to give a little 5-minute presentation on what they thought the number one goal or problem or change was that they needed to make. Not them as the executive, but that the company needed to make if they were the company. What did they really think was the priority? And everybody had a different kind of outlook as to what was most important, which was beautiful because everybody had a chance to bring something to the table in that little mini brainstorm. But the point of the matter was the CEO was really grasping for how do they make the greatest contribution to their organization. And they even brought up, they said during that meeting, should I even be the CEO? And everybody in the meeting, we know this individual is the CEO. They really are the perfect manifestation of the charismatic leader CEO, right? Yes, December, Yvonne, that's the perfect time for it, or January. One day in your in the hotel, check into the hotel. Sorry, guys, on Facebook, Yvonne just commented on YouTube here, and we were talking about retreats. So the key to a strategic planning retreat is that you get out of town, that you get out of your house, you turn off your phone, you turn off the live stream, internet crap, all these, you turn me off, you turn the interruptions off, and you shut everything else out. Not that you haven't been gaining access to information and learning and being a great sponge over the year, but there's a point where you got to stop learning, and then you got to think about it and encapsulate, what are you going to do with everything you learn? Most, especially coaches, most of us are so busy learning, so busy trying to know everything, and we're great with helping others with what we know. That's what we love to do a lot of times. But we don't even take a day out of the year to help ourselves, to make a difference for ourselves, to really take ownership of what we know rather than just passing it off to other people. So thanks for that. That's me too. It's been too long. I really should be doing it once a year, and I guess I missed 2016 as things move fast. So it's time to get back in there and do my own strategic planning rather than just for other big coaching businesses. So anyway, coming back to this, the CEO asked in question, should I even be the CEO? And we said, yes, you need to be the CEO. But he was really asking, he was confused, where should I be putting my time? And so as we talked, the truth came out. The truth was he's been wasting his time running around being putting out fires, being kind of not a micromanager, but managing crises again and again and again and again. And this guy is the only individual on that team who's really well honed as a communicator to create and put together high-level strategic alliances, to grow the business through charismatic communication. He's not a tech guy. He's the big picture guy to really inspire the team and get them to follow his vision, right? So, and everybody's like, you got to be the CEO. You're the CEO. And I told him my definition of a CEO is he's the guy that his responsibility is grow the business. And that means he's the chief salesperson of the company. He's the one that sells the product. He's the chief salesperson of the product or service. He's the one that sells the company to the other the internal employees. The teams. Convinces them to work there. That it's a great place to be. He's the chief salesman of partnerships. He goes out there and makes sure that there's strategic alliances that will contribute and help them to develop and grow their business. And of course, in a small business, that's different than a large business. But the bottom line is he was the chief kind of growth officer of the business. And so he's too busy with all this other stuff to really focus 100% on that, because the CEO, who is a phenomenal entrepreneur, this is an individual who's taken $1 million risks several times over the course of his life in business, put hundreds of thousands of dollars at risk at least, and won and lost at times. And when he works on these things, he's not like intimidated by it and scared and stuff like that, like most of us like I would be. He's like, okay, well, this is just what we're gonna do. Like, no intimidation or very, very little fear. I'm not saying he's never afraid. It doesn't impact his behavior, right? That is an entrepreneurial skill. That's the individual that takes the risks in a business venture. And here he is doing what managers do, running around trying to help everybody, trying to serve everybody, right? And so the CEO was wasting time, because the entrepreneur, if you look at the eMyth, these 3 different roles of that Michael Gerber talks about in eMyth. I don't have a graph for you anywhere, but he talks about the entrepreneur role. He talks about the manager role, and he talks about the artist or the technician role. And the artist is the expert, the one that knows everything, the one that can create the product so beautifully, the one that paints the beautiful picture, the one that puts the right spices in the hamburger so the McDonald's has like hopefully decent tasting hamburgers, not really, but anyway, that they can make a lot of. The manager is the one that gets everybody to do their job, right? That keeps the status quo going, keeps the business steadily moving from day to day to day. The entrepreneur, though, is the one that invests the big dollars, the one that is the chief salesman, like a CEO would be, the one that really causes the money to flow in and causes that business to grow. That's the entrepreneur. And so here's an entrepreneur, supposed to be the CEO, wasting time as a manager. Nothing wrong with being a manager, but he's not the manager, right? So, and here it is, they've got the executive team. 2 of the individuals on the executive team are clearly managers. And guess what? The managers are also wasting their time, because they needed to be governing and managing the rest, the team, while the CEO is supposed to be growing the business. And the managers were really underutilized. The managers actually were acting almost like executive assistants, like just doing like the admin work for the other stakeholders, the other executives, the entrepreneurs, the owners of the business, when they really should be leading those teams and getting those teams to stay in line and hold the teams accountable, really even hold the entrepreneurs accountable. Let me give you an example. This same business, about 6 months ago, I led a training for them about strategic execution and management. And strategic execution and management is just a fancy way of saying you have a plan, this is how you actually get it done, right? Strategic execution and management. So how to get the strategy executed. Hey, Hector. Yep, I can't stop doing the lives, you and me both. actually execute this stuff, actually get it done, and then manage the process so you have some control over the execution as well. So this is the training. It was like an hour and a half training. So I led them through, like, here's what you do. You report to each other in a meeting. You check in with what's going on, what's working, what's not. You hold each other accountable. You make sure that your teams report into you as well, and you are managing and responsible for the result happening. You own the result while you lead others to do the work, right? Strategic execution and management. And they just hated it. I mean, they were just like, we don't have time for this. We can't do all this fancy stuff. And at the end of that, I mean, we had a little bit of arguing and a little bit of pitching from my end again. They kind of ended that meeting saying, well, we'll do some of it. We'll get some of it done. Let's see if we can't, kind of get this rolling. Because, they believed what I was saying. They just didn't see a way to really execute it fully, speaking of strategic execution and management. So anyway, so now we're at the annual retreat, the annual planning retreat. And the managers are sitting there saying, nothing's getting done. This is not happening the way we planned it to, although a lot of things that they planned did get done. We're not as nimble as we need to be. And the CEO is sitting there saying, I need you guys to hold me accountable for staying the CEO, to put at least 30% of my time into the CEO position, where I'm only spending like 10% right now. And he's asking the managers that are on the team, hold me accountable, right? And of course the manager's like, really, you want us to do that? Because they could totally do it. They're willing and able to do it, but they were never empowered to do it, even though we went through the entire process of what that looks like and how to do it, right? So the CEO was trying to manage this team, manage all the executives, where he was not a manager. And the managers are sitting there just being nice assistants, just saying, okay, well, I guess we're just not going to be very organized. I guess we're not really going to get much done. We'll just, hey, the CEO is a charismatic individual. People blindly, it's like a Steve Jobs kind of thing. They're just like in awe, right? In a way. And it's kind of a political theater in that it's like they're just kind of trying to play to not like they're trying to BS the CEO, but they're, trying to accommodate what the CEO's vision is, right? And here the CEO's got a great vision for the business, but the CEO is not really the strongest manager for that team. And so the team is just going kind of haphazard, just like shooting the shit about stuff, talking. Nothing's really getting managed or executed at the level that it could be, because there's not enough accountability, because an entrepreneur is not a big accountability person. They're not they're not there running around chasing after people, trying to get them to do what they said they would do in the first place. The entrepreneur is on to the next thing. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs as well, and very seldom do I meet an entrepreneur who doesn't say one thing. They're like, hey, I'm going to do this with you, and we'll work together on this. And then like 3 years later, nothing. It's just crickets. Why? Why do they talk, and not actually deliver sometimes? It's not because they're BSing. It's not because they're full of it. It's simply because they've got entrepreneurial ADD. They're on to the next opportunity. They're running around looking for the next risk to take, Whereas the manager, when they say something and they say this is what's going to happen, they're accountable for it. They'll hold others accountable for it. They'll make sure the whole team executes. They'll be very structured, excruciating for the CEO, excruciating for the entrepreneur, but they can still make it happen. The managers are like the control mechanism of the business. They keep control of that business. Entrepreneurs grow a business and then it just explodes. If you're an entrepreneur and you're watching this right now, I already know if you've been around long enough and you haven't had managers really supporting you, or you haven't invested in management in your business, you've probably destroyed several businesses at this point. You just explode them, because you grow, and all of a sudden it's like, uh-oh, wait a second, we're bankrupt, right? Because you just got so big so fast. Entrepreneurs get full up on that risk. Managers, they hate that stuff. They hate that risk. They want to control things. They want certainty for the organization. That's their kind of driving force, right? So the managers are underutilized. They're not controlling the meetings, so nothing's getting executed. The CEO's just talking, and in love with all the risks that he's thinking about taking. And so basically what happened was they were crossing roles. the CEO was trying to get the managers to be like him, and the managers were trying to do that to please the CEO, and the CEO was busy being a manager the whole time. So so basically what that executive team looked like at the end of the day, or at least at this point, was lousy managers and lousy entrepreneurs. Actually, there's really good managers and really good entrepreneurs on that team, but they're being somebody that they're not. So the managers are wasting time, the CEO is wasting time because the managers were underutilized. So what my job was to straighten all that out, which was a bit of a mess, but again, that's what happens with entrepreneurs sometimes. So what did I do to do that? It wasn't that complicated, come to think of it. All I had to do was I had to say, look, two of you on this team, you're entrepreneurs, just like I talked to you about just now. You're there to take the risk. You're there to measure the risk, to make sure the cash flows in, and you manage that. You're not managing the cash. You're just managing yourself as someone who's making good business decisions to grow this business as big as it possibly can be, to really make the ROI happen, to cash flow. And then two of you on this team are managers. You're good at controlling things. You're good at making sure people do their job. You're good at the minutia of it. You're good at the organizational aspect of this. So you guys need to do the business manager role and keep things organized and keep things on track so the wheels don't just spin off the car. And then you entrepreneurs, your job is to make the business work. Figure out the marketing, figure out the sales, make it all that fit together so massive amounts of cash flow through this business so you can afford to pay the manager's salary and you can afford to pay everybody else as well as yourselves. And if you want to run after those dollars, that's fantastic, but you've got to take that on fully. Once they realized that, everything got straightened out. The CEO said, great, I'm going to be the CEO. I'm going to stay in that role. And he turned to one of the manager types in that team and he said, you are going to be the business manager. You're going to manage me. You're going to manage our executive meetings. You're going to manage your teams. And you're going to manage everybody on the executive team to make sure everything gets executed. That's the difference. And he had to make that decision, right? That was the CEO's. But as soon as he made that decision, now the manager's in charge, right? Now the manager's empowered to do what a manager does. So that's the point I wanted to make first here, walking in before we got to this organization, kind of organizing the entrepreneur's mess, because the manager can actually help to do that. And I wanted to straighten that out first. The manager's mindset is control, consistency, execution, keeping things the way they are, steadiness. That's the manager's job and their mindset. The entrepreneur's mindset is the opposite of that. It's chaos. It's flexing their entrepreneurial muscles. It's trying new things. It's gambling is a big part of it. They're all about uncertainty, where the manager is all about certainty. They don't want control. They get bored. They get tired of control. They start hating control. They want to grow. So they're all about growth, profit, winning, competition, problem solving, creativity. That's the entrepreneur's domain. Somewhat. Let's put it that way. So hopefully you get the difference there between the manager and the entrepreneur mindset, because it was so wild, because it's like, I talked to the team about it. I said, did you guys read the eMyth? And several of the guys on the team had not. And I said, you have to read that book. You got to get straight on what the difference is in these mindsets, because they were not pairing it up correctly, in my opinion at least. But now that they're clear on that, and now that the roles have shifted, they're in a whole nother world. They can be so much more powerful, so much more productive, so much more in control of their business. So that's the first point. Now, let's talk about the messy part. This is the part that got ugly last week, and I talked to this team about how it was odd. It was like the first conversation was me like hitting them as hard as I could. Now part of that was they probably needed a little bit of good tough medicine, loving loving accountability, so to speak, because they're in a they're kind of in a crisis period right now. And so part of my job was to kind of wake them up out of their stupor, not just have them realize how dangerous a position they're in, because they are in a dangerous position, but also to help them to see how they could get through it, and that they can do something about this. They can truly take control of their business. And that wasn't about entrepreneur versus manager roles. That was actually more about, I have it in my notes here. Let me pull it out so I can try to repeat this a little bit. Actually, you know what? I don't think I... Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah, okay, here it is. So we were talking about challenging times and how they define a business. Like a business like Amazon. There was a decade there where Jeff Bezos was the piñata. Everybody just beat him up. Those were challenging times, but it defined Amazon. And there's so many great examples of that. How when we're going through hard times, it defines you. It defines your business. But the question was how this business was going to be defined. And I individually coach all these individuals, and so they were saying things like, I'm burnt out, and this isn't the right business for me, and I'm just trying to have more time to myself now. I'm just trying to have a better quality of life and balance my life and have quality of life. And again, nothing wrong with that, but when your business is crumbling, it's like, it's not exactly the conversation to be involved in. You got to put out the fire. You got to get things handled. Things like, I'm just living in reaction mode, that kind of stuff. And so it was just like, these kind of statements, I know they don't reflect everything about who you are, but if you're talking that shit while your business is falling apart, you're dead. And I've done that myself. But that's just another way of hiding. And I just told him, like, you're hiding from the business. You're distracting yourself from the really, really not so fun thing that you're facing right now. And you have the option to do that if you want, but don't act like you're committed to turning this business around then, because you're not. You're an abomination to the promise that you give to your team, saying, making people expect that you're a business leader for them, because you're not. And it's going to lead to ruin. I literally said that. It's like this is going to ruin your business. Not the mistakes you made. Like, you can overcome those. Even the dire ones, because they had made some pretty bad mistakes. They can figure that out. They can resolve that. They can correct that. But the long-term mindset of selling out in your business when your business is really in a crisis period, that's going to ruin you. That's going to ruin your business. And I told him, look, you got fun things in your life that you'd probably rather be doing than sitting here in this retreat, than working on your business, I'm sure, but you're still here. So that tells me that you're not just somebody who's just going to sell out and blow everything off. But you know what? If that's really what you're really up for doing and you don't want to be here, then you need to go and let somebody else do the job that you're not fulfilling right now. So, and then we talked a little bit about recovery. The fact that if they can repair the challenges that they're going through right now, that repairing will make that a stronger team. They make them stronger, make their business stronger than ever before. One of my favorite metaphors that I was taught by one of my original mentors, Tony Robbins, through working for him as a coach, was he always talks about when you break a bone, when that bone has healed, once it's fully recovered, like assuming that bone recovers, that part where the bone broke, it's the strongest part of that bone. It's the strongest bone in the entire body. And it's the same with a business that goes through hell and back. That repairing process makes you stronger than you could ever be before, because really just nobody wants to go through that kind of pain unless they have to. And at this point, this business, it basically has to. So I said, look, this is actually a really good time. Winter can be a wonderful time. Some people freeze to death in winter, and then some people ski in winter. So when you're going through hard times like this, you can fix things that are broke. Because you have to now, because it's a necessity, not just a nice idea. You can you can trash what doesn't work. Get rid of it, throw it away. You create musts. You create some real necessities in your business when you're going through hard times, because it becomes necessary, because there's too much pain if you don't make those into necessities. So that was a kind of like the mini keynote that I gave them when I was really just trying to hit them as hard as I could with the viewpoint that I could bring together as a team. Because one-on-one, it's like you don't want to beat up on your client like that one-on-one. But as a team, you can kind of get in people's face, and it's a lot safer because they're all there and they can kind of fire back at you if they really feel that you're full of it. And they did a little bit here and there on that one, but I thought it was one of the most valuable conversations that we had the entire weekend. Anyway, coming back to this, the business, it's a bit of a mess. And the reason it's a mess, in my opinion, is that entrepreneurs, the mindset of an entrepreneur, as we just talked about before, is all about risk and gambling and making real smart decisions and then forgetting about it and just letting it go. That is not a very organized personality trait. It's a mess. Entrepreneurs, real entrepreneurs, I'm not just talking about people that want to be entrepreneurs. Like most of the people that will watch this video, whether you're on live or on a replay, if you think you're an entrepreneur, there's a 9 out of 10 chance that you're just a wantrepreneur. You may have entrepreneurial tendencies. You may like the romance of being an entrepreneur, but really great entrepreneurs are not romantic at all. They make a decision, a big risk, and you know what? If they find out they're wrong, they change that decision in a heartbeat. They don't get glued to it. They don't get romantic about it. People like myself, the artists, the experts, the coaches, and the managers, the humanists, the ones that kind of, figure out how to make things tick and get people to get along, we get real romantic about different notions. That's not a bad thing. It's just a different personality trait. So entrepreneurs aren't like that, and partially as a result of the risk that they take, partially as a result of them just being able to let go spontaneously of like anything they remember about past failures and stuff like that. They're just messy. They're just a mess. They leave a wake of chaos behind them. They're a mess, and so they need help. And so as coaches, you and I are the ones that are there to help them. We don't need to be entrepreneurs like them to help the entrepreneur. We need to be anything but the entrepreneur to help the entrepreneur. So as I'm not a real entrepreneur, I would say, by far. I have entrepreneurial tendencies, there's no doubt about that. But, I realize, I've gotten to the point over the last, 3, 4, 5 years where I'm like, okay, Jeff, that's not really you. You're not a great entrepreneur. So why don't you help them? Why don't you help the real entrepreneurs out there? You probably will be more profitable. You probably be more successful if you stop trying to be something you're not, and help those that really are that be the best version of that they are. Anyway, so if that fits for you as a coach, then it might be valuable. Who knows? But anyway, entrepreneurs are a mess. That's the point I'm making. And they need help. And so this conversation, as we get to the second point that I wanted to offer you, is a matter of organizing the entrepreneur's mess and the risks of disorganization. These are the items I'm going to cover here. And specifically, I'm going to give you a resource, if you stick around, that'll give you access to the exact steps that I took with this team, this $3 million a year business, basically a coaching business that they're running, as to how they were to organize their plan for the entire year. And now that's not the only aspect of organization that an entrepreneur needs help with, but it certainly is a major factor because it's organization at the highest level. It's like the meta level organization. It's meta organization. It's organizing the plan, organizing the priorities. So I wrote this last week, and if you saw my email, great. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs hate my guts now because of this email. So, but I'm going to read it to you, so just so I can get more flack from it. So this is how coaches, how a great coach. Hey Priscilla, you should be doing your live stream, shouldn't you? I have so much to learn from you. So anyway, this is how the coach cleans up the mess that the entrepreneur makes. I've got a couple. You could probably find them somewhere on my profile. So anyway, so how does a coach clean up the entrepreneur's mess? Effective entrepreneurs, they become the leaders and the owners of businesses, right? Because they're the ones that take the risks. They get the reward, right? They're the reason why a business exists. If there were no entrepreneurs in the world, there would be no businesses, because nobody would bet any money. You have to invest some, not just time, but money, reputation in a business in order for it to actually launch and be a successful business. So they are entrepreneurs equal business. And you might say, well, Coca-Cola, there's no entrepreneurs at Coca-Cola. They're just a bunch of managers now because they just kind of do the same thing over and over again, right? Okay, fair enough. But 120 years ago when Coca-Cola started, there had to be an entrepreneur that said, let's put cocaine and sugar water together and see what happens, right? And they eliminated that later. But anyway, the point of the matter is entrepreneurs, the ones that take the risks, they get the rewards, they own the businesses, and they create the businesses. They bear businesses into existence. So while this mythical entrepreneurs, I'm reading my email if you haven't figured it out already. This, there's my guy, he says hi, from another live stream long ago. So while this mythical entrepreneur sounds like a god, like a demi-god with unlimited resources and power, the fact is they need help. No matter how powerful an entrepreneur is, they need tons of help. And this is one of the problems I see coaches have. You're a great coach. You can help all sorts of people. And then you get with this high-powered business owner, entrepreneur type, and they've got tons of money. They make tons of money. They have tons of employees. They pay everybody's salary. They swing a big bat. They've got a lot of power. And so as coaches, we're like, I'm supposed to help them. They should be helping me. They're the ones with the money. I'm sitting here begging for a job, right? I just want a coaching gig. And so it becomes intimidating for us. And we think, well, they don't need any help. They don't got no problems. They're doing fine. And I think, I know I've done this. We get stars in our eyes about it. And then all of a sudden we cease to be able to make a difference for them. Why? Because we're just so busy being in awe of them, worshiping them as if they're infallible, as if there's nothing they need. They're all powerful. And it couldn't be further from the truth. The fact is they need help in their business. They need massive amounts of help. And in fact, here's what's really sad for an entrepreneur is because they look like they have so much power, i.e. money, basically, the form of power that they have, because they look like they don't need any help, nobody helps them. Like, nobody reaches out to really make a difference. Well, some people do who are trying to just profit from them. So they get a lot of scammers, right? They get cheated a lot. And then what's even worse is entrepreneurs think, nobody can help me. And the only people that are trying to help me are people that either can't help me or are full of it. They're just lying to me. So it's even worse. So anyway, I'm gonna give you a link to this video that talks about the exact method I use to help these kind of frazzled entrepreneurs, because they really are frazzled. They are haphazard in their execution. And they usually have haphazard ideas. Here's an entrepreneur right here. Hey, Jeff. So talking about disorganization in the entrepreneur's mind, inspired by this weekend. Thank you very much. So they have ideas, but they tend to be haphazard. You're actually one of the most organized entrepreneurs I think I've ever met. So they've got haphazardness in their ideas, though. Let's put it that way. And my job as a coach, especially during a planning process, during a strategic planning retreat, is to turn that idea, is to support them in turning that idea into a finely tuned plan, something that is no longer haphazard. So, there's 3 steps to this planning process. The first step is just capture everything. It's kind of like a brainstorm. Second step is prioritizing this. Usually entrepreneurs are pretty good at prioritization, and actually a lot of them are pretty good at brainstorming. But one thing we know they're not very good at is organization. One of the individuals I worked with this weekend, we had all these great ideas that we were brainstorming one day, and then he said, I just want to go make my calls and do this stuff. He was so excited about the execution of it, he didn't even want to organize the plan. That is the entrepreneur's tendency, right? Very powerful. Most people won't get off their ass and do anything, right? But again, it leaves a gap. And as coaches, we need to fill that gap for them, because they're not going to do it by themselves. They're just not. So, I guess the point I'm making with that last 5 minutes of conversation around the awe that we have of entrepreneurs is, look, if you're a coach, don't let yourself get intimidated, and actually remember that power that you see in them is a thin veneer. Underneath that is somebody who's struggling in a whole variety of ways that you can't necessarily see unless you pierce that veil, unless you look very closely. You ask the kind of questions that a really great coach would ask to find out what the hell is going on inside. What's going on inside the business? What's going on inside that entrepreneur's mind? What's going on inside their finances? Whatever. Yeah, it's a challenge, but here's the thing. Chances are you're not both. Thanks for that, Yvonne. She says, the double challenge is to be both an entrepreneur and a coach. And the fact is that most coaches are not entrepreneurs. Let's put it this way. I'll give you a little secret. We got to go in close for this one. The entrepreneurs that I meet, the real entrepreneurs that I meet that want to be coaches, never become coaches. They fail miserably at coaching. And the reason is because they're so busy finding opportunity, taking risks, going to bat and swinging for the home run, that they can't be bothered with helping someone else figure that shit out. They wouldn't waste their time. Ultimately, maybe they'll dabble in it, right? They might moonlight as a coach, but they're not going to do it long term. They couldn't be less interested in that kind of thing. Getting in somebody else's business where they're not going to make the profit, where they're not going to create the opportunity. Now look, there are some entrepreneurs who will use coaching skills to go into a business, take a piece of that business, take ownership of it, or make a very large sum of money very quickly. Okay, that's fair. They're kind of intrapreneurs. They're working as entrepreneurs for that business, with that business for a period of time, right? Okay, that's fair. But those coaches are few and far between. I don't think I've ever worked with one of those coaches. I've talked to a few that have thought about it, that have discussed that concept, but I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who've actually executed on that. And there are a few that have, there's no doubt. But those are probably the few hybrids of an entrepreneur / coach. Most coaches, you're just coaches. You're just a coach. And by the way you know it is look by, if you're 40 or older and you look back at the last, 15, 20 years of your career, and if you haven't started any successful businesses, or the businesses that you've started have not thrown off large sums of cash, you are not an entrepreneur. Or you're just really, really lazy about the entrepreneurship. That's a possibility, but I would doubt that. Most entrepreneurs, man, when they see opportunity, they go great guns on that stuff. So really, it's not hard to be both, because the fact is you're not both. Again, just giving you my opinion on this, but the reality is most coaches like to think they're entrepreneurs, but they just have entrepreneurial tendencies. They're really great coaches. Now, that doesn't mean you can't run a coaching business. That doesn't mean you can't have a coaching practice that's very successful, right? You definitely can. But it's a practice more than a business usually. It's usually, if it's going to turn into let's put it this way, if it's going to turn into a business, an entrepreneur will find you. They'll think you're a genius. They're like, wow, you have amazing ideas. Look at what you came up with, all this interesting coaching and this content you've put out, these videos you've made, all that kind of stuff. And they'll say, I can make money with this. And they'll go turn your practice or your coaching or your ideas or your intellectual properties, they'll turn that into a business. But they'll also take half your business. And they deserve to have half of it as well. So if you're just a solopreneur, so to speak, as people like to say nowadays, and you're the assistant, you're the one that does all the work, you take care of the coaching part of the service, you create the content, and you run the business, you're not really an entrepreneur. You're a coach, or you're probably the artist, you're the creative, you're the one that comes up with these amazing ideas. I'm not saying you can't build that business to the point where an entrepreneur will take it over and grow it even bigger for you, but you're going to struggle to do that, chances are. And it'll never really quite be your greatest expression of who you are. So really realize, if you're the artist, be the artist. Be the best artist you could be. You should be, you should be on live streams. You should be creating videos. You should be writing books. You should be doing blog posts. And I talk to so many coaches that are like, well, I can't be bothered with that because I'm busy coaching, or I'm busy getting this business together. It's like, that's your business. That's the best expression of your business, probably. Unless you really are an entrepreneur, and if you are, then hire us. Hire coaches to work for you, and you go build the business, if that's the case. But you're probably not both, in reality, from a pure personality perspective. So I'm glad you made that point. It's an interesting conversation, and there's no right answer. But entrepreneurs, generally speaking, are very good at making those snap judgments, those binary decisions, and saying it's this or it's that. It's not both. And so that was my job to say that right there. Anyway, so the point of all of this is that entrepreneurs are a mess, and we can walk in and help them clean up at least their strategies, their thought processes, their priorities in a strategic planning process in an organization step. And take the ideas that are in a plan and actually structure them, actually organize them so they make sense, so other people on the team can execute them. As a business coach, you can help that entrepreneur in organizing their business themselves. They can usually entrepreneurs don't even organize themselves. They're a mess themselves, right? So you can help them to organize themselves. You can help them to organize their teams. You can help them also, like we're going to talk about now, to organize their plans. Well, entrepreneurs are amazing rainmakers, amazing money makers, amazing risk takers. They leave a giant mess in their wake. I mentioned that a couple minutes ago. As a result, their businesses, albeit money-making machines, tend to fall into chaos and disrepair. So they grow the business up until the point where chaos starts to kill the business. One way of thinking about it. They create problems, ultimately, that kill the business. Now, at first, those problems make them money. They're like, wow, we're making all this money. One of the entrepreneurs that was just came on just a second ago, they built what we call a buy-sell business, which is a business where you buy an item from someone and then you resell it for a profit, right? Very simple business. You could do this. You can make a lot of money off of doing that, just as an individual, or you can actually make it into a business. Time for dinner. So I went over on this one. So, but they started buying a very specific type of asset. It's an expensive type of asset. They were basically in the music business, so instruments and fancy stuff that worth hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. They would buy some of it and then they would sell it, and they were making tons of money. And then they built a business around themselves, around this idea of buying these assets and selling them. They built a website, they hired a ton of salespeople and a team, they got a warehouse, they did all this different stuff, and that basically killed the business. Now, you would think, well, if their business grew to that point, how did that kill the business? Well, the way it killed the business, part of it was just cash issues that they had, but part of it was also that these individuals made entrepreneurial decisions that never ultimately got controlled at a level they needed to be controlled, to where they hit a certain scale where those problems that they weren't really looking at cleanly because they were so busy thinking about the risks they were taking and making measured risk assessment, those problems ultimately overtook the business, and then they had to bail from that business. This happens every day. This is not a unique pattern. The bigger the business the entrepreneur builds, the more problems they have, and the more help that your client, your entrepreneur client, needs from you. The bigger it gets, the harder it falls, unless there's a great manager, at least, if not a coach out there, that can really help to structure this stuff for them. By the way, why don't our entrepreneurs take the time to organize? I think I kind of mentioned this, but this is in my email, so I'll read it. It's not because they can't. It's usually just because they won't. It just doesn't excite them. Luckily, though, they still feel the pain when they're lacking organization. And that organization, that itch that they have, is something that as a coach, I'm pretty happy to scratch. I get paid to scratch that itch. And you as a coach can do the same thing. You can make that difference as well. Entrepreneur that I work with, his name is Dan, for lack of a better fake name. Classic entrepreneur, runs their business by the seat of their pants. And he would tell me on a regular basis, my strategic plan, I don't need a strategic plan. My strategic plan is in my head. Unfortunately, his head was a disorganized mess. So I helped him organize his strategic plan in writing, kind of in the way that I just showed you. Let me see. Speaking of organization, I should have this. Right. Where did it go? Anyway, it was here. Here it is. It's underneath a giant pile. Help him to organize it in a way that, actually makes sense, that other people can read, right? All right, speaking of disorganization. So I helped him to do this. I probably need help doing this myself. Helping him to get his ideas in a final written plan that everybody on his team could understand and follow. So I told Dan that if he didn't get his plan organized, if he didn't do this, that he wouldn't remember his priorities, that his team would never understand what he was planning, that his team would not be able to track their progress to realizing Dan's vision, that no one would understand what anyone else on the team was really up to. So nobody would really know what was going on. And then ultimately the business would lose direction, stagnate, and die. So this is what I had to tell him. Now again, I'm sure I used, maybe nicer words, but you get the idea. Your business is going to die if you don't keep this thing organized, and you're not the one to do it. He got the message. So after that little bit of browbeating, Dan decided that organization is pretty important inside a strategic plan, at least. Organizing sets up this game of business in such a way where the game can be played and won. Otherwise, your client becomes one of the 93% of businesses that fail in their first decade of existence. One of my original mentors, Tony Robbins, he used to say it this way. He would say, he still says it like this. He says, business is a game. It's a game for gladiators. Where in this arena of business, the longer you play the game, the faster you die. The longer you play, the faster you die. I love that statement. It's just like, wow. It's a pretty wild statement. And it's true. The truth is that it's like 90%, 93% of all small businesses fail within 10 years. And by the way, the 7% that are left after 10 years, a lot of them are just suffering. They're just suffering through their businesses as well. So, so this organization piece is really what it takes to make it so that that game, which very few people ever win, can actually be played and won. The point, simple, if you haven't already gotten it, part of the business planning process must be to organize. So I'm going to send you a video that actually covers this. And in fact, I'm going to put it in, if you're on YouTube, I'll put it in the comments a little bit later because I can't paste it because I've got you on a device. But I'm actually going to give you, if you're on the Facebook Live right now, I'm going to put in your comments, if I can do this. This is actually a link to the video where I actually cover exactly how I organize businesses, specifically from their plan. Okay, so click that link, check that video out. That'll cover the whole 9 yards. The second link I'm going to give you, and again, if you're watching on YouTube, I'll give you this, in 10 minutes or so once we freeze this out. This is a link to the PDF download that actually covers the very specific steps to the organization step. Okay. So this step happens after the first two steps. I'll give you the first two steps a little later on. This is what we're talking about here. We're talking about organization, and that's a huge part of the strategic plan. So you can actually download this PDF, no opt-in needed, anything like that. You just go to that page, and it'll take you straight to literally one page download. I keep these little crib sheets to one page because I know I'm working with business owners. I know I'm working with entrepreneurs, and they have ADD. They all have ADD if they're good at what they do, and they can't read more than a page. So I got to get it down to a page or less, or else they won't figure it out. So check out the video, check out the download, and then if you are seeing this on on Facebook. I will give you notifications for these lives also on YouTube, and I just popped the link to the subscribe to the YouTube channel that I am in charge of. And then also pretty soon I'm only going to be posting these videos on our Facebook group and then our YouTube channel. So you will get the, thanks Yvonne, I appreciate it. Get out of here, go build your business. But the only way that you'll ultimately get these notifications is if you're subscribed to my channel, or if you join this Facebook group. And again, if you're on YouTube, I'll push that out to you in 10-20 minutes or so as well. So hope that made sense. If you got questions about this, or you think I'm wrong about something, or there's something that's confusing or doesn't make sense, or like whether it's this whole entrepreneur versus manager, or entrepreneur versus coach, or entrepreneur versus artist issue that we talked about today, or just the organization piece, and like why that's so important, and how you actually can convince a business owner, an entrepreneur client, that they are a complete mess and that they're going to wreck their businesses if they don't work with you to help them to do the same process or some similar version of that you might have created yourself. Then pop it in the chat wherever we are, in whatever zone we're in, whether this is on a blog or on YouTube or on Facebook, and get out there and coach those businesses, because it's just a mess out there, and the entrepreneurs aren't going to fix it themselves. And like I said, it's not that they can't, because I'm sure they could if they had to, but most of them just won't. And you can bridge that gap for them, and if you get paid to do that, you can take care of yourself and your family on that. And then the entrepreneur can take care of themselves, their team, their customers, and their families, and all of their families, as a result of that meta level organization that you bring to the table. Only you can do that as the coach. But in order to do that, you gotta tell the entrepreneur what for. You gotta tell them what they don't want to hear. There are so many people are just praising them. So many of their teams are just kissing their ass. You cannot let yourself do that. You are hurting that client. You're robbing them of the chance that they have to truly be helped. And the reason is because if you act the same way that everybody else acts around them, first of all, they won't hear you. And second, they're going to think that you are like everybody else, and they'll just put you to work for them. They won't hire you as a leader for them, as a coach for them. There's no reason you can't lead the business leaders, but you've got to be willing to step up and be a leader for them. So if any of that is confusing, doesn't make sense, you got questions about it, or there's something else that you're looking for here, shoot me a comment or DM me or whatever we do nowadays, and I will talk to you next time.